Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a piece of source material on the table today that I honestly struggled to get through at first.
Yeah, it's intense.
It really is. Not because it's poorly written or anything. It's actually incredibly vivid. But it forces you to look at something just very uncomfortable. We usually think of love and violence as opposites, right?
Right.
You have safety on one side and danger on the exact opposite side. But what happens when those lines don't just blur, but completely invert? Like, what happens when the person holding the weapon is doing it because they love you?
Phew. It's a terrifying paradox. And it's exactly what we're exploring today. We're looking at an essay draft by Julius titled The Plank and the Prayer: How Love Was the Sharpest Tool of My Abuse.
Such a heavy title.
It is. And I want to be clear right from the jump here. This isn't just a memoir about a difficult childhood. It is a forensic analysis of a belief system. It's an autopsy of what he calls the twisted logic of salvation.
That phrase, twisted logic, it really stuck with me. Because on the surface, you read this and it's a story about abuse. But as you dig in, you realize it's actually a story about a specific kind of ecosystem.
An ecosystem of belief.
Right, an ecosystem where spiritual protection actually justifies physical torture.
Exactly. And the mission of our deep dives today is to really unpack that ecosystem. We need to understand how a parent's terrified love can be weaponized into what the author calls a loving hell.
Because if we just dismiss this as, bad people doing bad things, we completely miss the point.
We miss the scariest part, which is the logic behind it.
So let's start where the author starts, the catalyst. And considering the immense weight of what follows the beatings, the trauma, the inciting incident is disarmingly small.
It's almost mundane.
Yeah, it wasn't a crime. He didn't rebel. It was a biscuit.
A simple biscuit.
Julius writes that he was 7 years old. 7. And he accepted a biscuit from a classmate at school. Now, to you or me, that's just a snack.
Right.
But in the world Julius grew up in, that biscuit was essentially a loaded gun.
This is where we have to really step inside that ecosystem of belief. In the theology that governed his home, nothing is coincidental. A classmate isn't just a classmate. They could be an agent of darkness.
Wow.
So when another schoolmate reported this incident to Julius's father in church, the reaction wasn't, "Oh, don't spoil your dinner." It was absolute panic.
The text describes the father's reaction, and I think this really sets the tone for the entire piece. It wasn't rage,
No.
because I think that's what we expect, right? The angry, abusive parent just losing their temper. But Julius says it was frantic, terrified love.
That distinction is so crucial. If we want to understand this at all, we have to look through the father's eyes in that moment. To him, that biscuit wasn't flour and sugar.
He uses this incredible metaphor in the text.
The Trojan horse.
Yes. To his father, the biscuit was a Trojan horse.
And that implies a literal invasion. The father believed it was carrying a demonic payload directly into his son's body.
Just from eating a biscuit.
Just from the biscuit. He genuinely believed his 7-year-old was now a vessel for witchcraft. Like the biological boy was still there, sitting in the living room, but spiritually. He was compromised. He was an active threat.
And so the prayer warriors gather. And the irony here is just gut-wrenching. These are people, men and women from the church, who might usually be the ones to offer a child a sweet
Right.
or pat him on the head. But on this night, they aren't there to comfort him. They're there to fix him.
To beat the devil out of him.
Literally.
Literally. The flogging wasn't a punishment for bad behavior. It was a spiritual extraction. Julius actually calls it a prelude to grace.
A prelude to grace. That gave me chills when I read it. So you have a group of adults surrounding a terrified child, using a literal piece of wood to beat him, all while believing they are performing an act of supreme kindness.
It's cognitive dissonance on a massive scale. The plank was real, the pain was searing, but in their minds, the love was just as real. They weren't seeing a crying child.
What were they seeing?
They were seeing a battlefield. They had to defeat an enemy to save a hostage. The hostage just happened to be the child's soul.
Let's unpack this twisted logic a bit more, because I think for a lot of people listening, it's really hard to wrap our heads around how a father consents to that.
Of course.
How do you watch your child scream and think, yes, this is good?
It comes down to the stakes. We have to look at the calculus the father is running in his head. In this specific worldview, the alternative to the beating isn't just a spoiled child.
It's eternal damnation.
Exactly. Hellfire. If you genuinely believe with every fiber of your being that your child has this spiritual cancer that will result in them burning for eternity.
Then the temporary pain of a flogging seems like a mercy.
It's a necessary medical procedure.
That's a powerful analogy, like a surgeon cutting someone open to save their life. It hurts, it's violent, but it's saving them.
That's exactly how they justify it. The system brilliantly reframes the abuser as the savior. The father isn't hurting his son. He's fighting for his son's soul. And the victim, the child, is reframed as the source of danger.
And the child's reaction actually plays right into it, doesn't it?
It does. It's horrific.
Yeah.
The child's pain becomes proof that the demon is reacting.
Because if the child screams...
It's not the child screaming, it's the entity resisting the prayer.
Oh my God.
So the screaming is actually proof that the treatment is working.
That is a terrifying feedback loop. The more the child suffers, the more effective the abuse is deemed to be.
Sadly, yes. It confirms the diagnosis. It seals the logic tight so no light can get in.
But light did eventually get in for Julius.
It did.
And what's fascinating to me is that the loop didn't break because of some theological debate. He didn't read a philosophy book and decide, hey, this doesn't make sense.
No, it broke because of something much grittier.
Reality.
The tawdry reality, as he calls it.
Right. Enter the general overseer. This is the figurehead, the man who built this entire economy of fear, the one telling parents that biscuits are demonic in the first place.
The architect of the system. Julius describes this moment where the curtain is finally pulled back, and it turns out this man who prescribed planks and prayers for a 7-year-old was worshiping a very different god.
The god of power, sex, and control?
Exactly. They discovered the overseer had a secret idol. But it gets much darker than just hypocrisy. The text mentions that women in the choir were being sexually abused.
And forced into abortions.
Yes, under the guise of discipline.
So let me get this straight. The same discipline, the same spiritual authority that justified beating a child with a plank was being used to cover up sexual predation.
Precisely. The love and fear the congregation felt were just resources for the overseer to consume. It was entirely camouflage for his appetites.
And when Julius's family discovered this, when the father actually saw the corruption at the source, they left the church, the idol collapsed.
But this leaves Julius with a really haunting question. And I think this is the absolute pivot point of the whole narrative. He says he wasn't asking, is there a God?
He was asking, who were they praying to when they beat me?
That is the most devastating realization. Think about it.
Yeah.
If the source, the overseer, was corrupt, then the spiritual power was a lie.
Right.
And if the power was a lie, then the love that justified the violence was completely misplaced. It wasn't love for Julius, the terrified 7-year-old boy. It was love for an idea, love for a system.
It creates this massive vacuum because if they weren't hitting him for God, they were just hitting him.
They were hitting him because of their own fear. They were praying to their own panic. They loved the idea of a clean soul way more than the reality of the suffering child sitting right in front of them.
And that brings us to the broader implications of the source material. Because Julius makes it very clear that this isn't just his story. He calls it a microcosm of a continental tragedy.
Right. He zooms out to look at Africa as a whole. This isn't an isolated incident in one family's living room. The same twisted logic is playing out on a massive scale.
He mentions the child witches phenomenon.
Yes. This is a heartbreaking reality where parents abandon their children, sometimes literal toddlers, on the streets because a pastor confirmed they were witches.
Or the persecution of people with albinism.
Exactly. Communities hunting people with albinism for body parts. It's driven by that exact same fear, the fear that sees demons in difference. If a child is different or stubborn or just unlucky, the ecosystem of belief labels them a threat.
And what makes this so difficult to combat is the impunity. The text mentions that these abusive pastors operate with a kind of shield.
Their spiritual authority acts as a shield against earthly justice. I mean, who are you to question the man of God?
Right. The legal system often struggles to intervene because it's framed as a religious matter.
It creates a space where abuse is almost protected by the community's respect for the divine.
And as Julius points out, the perpetrators aren't cartoon villains. It would be so much easier if they were, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If they were just monsters rubbing their hands together in a dark cave.
It would be easier to process. But they are mothers. They're fathers, grandmothers, elders. They are people who genuinely believe they are protecting their loved ones from invisible evil.
That's what makes the abuse so incredibly resilient. It's perpetuated by the very people tasked with love and protection.
Yes.
So where does this leave Julius today? He's survived this loving hell. He's seen the man behind the curtain. He's realized the continental scale of this tragedy. Where is he now?
Well, today, Julius Icodate is an educator. He's a trauma-informed consultant. He actually founded something called the Awaken Away Initiative.
I love that name, Awaken Away. It implies both the realization waking up and the movement of getting away from the toxic system.
It really does. And his journey was a profound transition from dogma to humanism. He actually mentions that he founded a church later in life, but then he loved it.
Why did he leave his own church?
Because he realized he was still operating within a system that inherently demanded belief in the invisible over the visible.
So he felt he had to step away from the supernatural entirely to actually find a cure for the trauma.
He had to completely redefine love. And this is the core of his new philosophy. He contrasts the old love, the kind that inflicts wounds to save the soul, with a new love, a love that seeks to heal wounds.
He has this quote in the essay that really defines the resolution of the piece for me. He says, "The opposite of superstition is not atheism, it is empathy."
That is the absolute key takeaway. The opposite of superstition is empathy. Think about that for a second. Superstition disconnects you from the human sitting in front of you because you're constantly looking for ghosts.
You're looking through them to find the demon.
Exactly. But empathy forces you to look at the human, to validate their actual pain.
Instead of trying to cast out a ghost, you sit down and listen to the trauma. You say, what happened to you was real and it was wrong.
It's about seeing human suffering as a strictly human problem. Not a spiritual war, but a problem that requires human solutions. Compassion, critical thinking, justice.
It's a complete shift from looking up for answers to looking at each other.
Beautifully put. Julius's argument is essentially that we need to love each other more than we fear the devil, because the fear is what allows the plank to swing in the first place.
It's incredible how he manages to turn such a horrific personal experience into a call for something so gentle. He's not calling for revenge against his father or the church. He's calling for connection.
And that's the true power of his narrative. He completely deconstructs the Trojan horse. The biscuit was just a biscuit. The boy was just a boy. The demons were the fear itself.
So what does this all mean for us, for the listener navigating their own world? Obviously, not everyone has been flogged by prayer warriors over a snack, but this concept of twisted love, of hurting someone for their own good, that feels deeply universal.
It is universal. We see it in so many different forms. Whenever ideology overrides empathy, we are in danger of this dynamic.
Right.
Whether it's strict religious dogma, or even rigid social expectations, or political extremism. Whenever we value the system more than the individual human standing right in front of us, we open the door to abuse disguised as virtue.
It really makes you question your own motivations and how you deal with people you love. Are you reacting to the person, or are you reacting to a fear you have about them?
Precisely. Are you seeing the Trojan horse, or are you seeing the child?
Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on the resources Julius provides now. The Awaken Away initiative sounds like he's trying to build the exact safety net he never had.
He is. He's moved from being the victim of a system to being a builder of a new one, a system based on tangible human love. It's about creating a community for those navigating life beyond dogma, giving them a real place to land where their trauma is validated, not spiritualized.
We've covered the biscuit, the beatings, the systemic corruption, and finally the redemption. It's a massive emotional journey in a short essay.
It really is. And I think the lingering thought for me is about the definition of salvation itself.
How so?
Well, in the beginning of his story, salvation meant escaping hellfire, even if it meant physically destroying the body to do it. But by the end, salvation means being seen, being heard, and being safe in your own skin.
That's a salvation we can actually deliver to each other. We don't need a general overseer for that.
No, we don't. We just need to drop the plank.
Now, as we end this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to mull over, something that builds on Julius's story, but asks a slightly different question of us.
Yeah, think about this. What if our human obsession with purity in any belief system, not just religion, but in our politics, our social circles, our online spaces, what if that demand for absolute purity is the very thing that makes us capable of the most profound cruelty?
Wow.
If we convince ourselves we are protecting something sacred, we can justify almost any harm to the people around us.
Stop looking for invisible enemies and start looking out for visible friends, an incredibly powerful thought to leave you with today. We hope this deep dive gave you a new perspective on the complexity of belief and the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
It's a stark reminder that while belief can be powerful, empathy is the ultimate protector.
Thank you so much for joining us. Take care of each other out there.
Catch you next time.